The alien city was alive with sound, but not the sound of kindness. Neon lights flickered above broken streets. Machines hummed in the distance, carrying goods for the rich. Voices rose and fell in the crowded market, bargaining, shouting, laughing. But for one alien mother, all of it felt far away. Her name did not matter here. To the city, she was nobody. She walked slowly through the marketplace, her baby held tight against her chest. The baby was wrapped in thin fabric, trembling and weak. The mother looked down, whispering softly, "Don't cry, little one. Don't cry. I will find something for you." Her eyes, large and tired, searched the shops around her. Every stall was filled with food, glowing fruits, steaming breads, bottles of liquid formula stacked neatly. The air smelled of spices and fried oil, heavy and warm. The sight made her stomach twist with hunger, but she did not think of herself. She thought only of the child in her arms. The baby let out a small cry. The sound cut through the noise of the marketplace. A few people looked, but only for a second, then turned away. To them, it was just another poor mother. There were too many like her. She reached into her small pouch. Inside were only a few coins, dull, scratched, and almost worthless. She counted them carefully. 1, 2, 3. Not enough. She knew it before she finished counting, but still, hope flickered in her chest. Maybe someone would show mercy. The mother stopped at a small shop. Behind the counter stood a vendor with 4 arms and tired eyes. He glanced at her, then at the pouch in her hand. "What do you want?" he asked. She lifted her head, voice shaking. "Please, formula for my baby. Just 1 bottle. I will give you all I have." She opened the pouch and showed the coins. Her hands trembled as she held them out. The vendor laughed, a dry sound. That's nothing. Not even half the price. Please," she whispered. "He is hungry. He is sick." "Just 1 bottle," the vendor shook his head. "Business is business. If you don't have money, you don't eat." He waved his hand, dismissing her like she was dust on the ground. Her heart dropped, but she did not move. She begged again, "I will work. I will clean. I will do anything. Please, for my child." But the vendor only turned away, speaking to another customer who had money in his hands. She stood there for a moment, frozen, her child whimpering against her chest. Finally, she stepped back, her eyes wet with tears. The crowd pushed past her. Feet stomped, voices shouted. No one cared. She was invisible. The mother walked on. The baby coughed softly, a weak sound that made her chest ache. She tightened her arms around the little one, whispering again, "I will not fail you, I promise." But the words felt heavy, like lies. The next stall was brighter, with golden bottles lined up like treasure. A young vendor smiled at wealthy customers, bowing and flattering them. When the mother stepped forward, the smile disappeared. She placed her coins on the counter, voice soft. "Please, 1 bottle. It is all I have." The young vendor picked up the coins and held them between his fingers, turning them as if they were dirty. Then he smirked. "You think this is enough?" "Not even close," the mother's throat tightened. "It is my last. Please, my baby needs it." The vendor dropped the coins back into her pouch with a flick of his hand. "Then your baby will cry. Move aside. You are wasting my time." Her knees felt weak, but she held herself up. Her baby began to cry louder now, drawing stares. People frowned, annoyed at the noise. No one offered help. The mother stepped back into the shadows of the market. Her eyes burned with tears, but she tried to stay calm for her child. She counted the coins again, even though she knew the truth. Still the same number. Still not enough. She looked around the marketplace. So many bottles of formula, so close yet impossible to reach. She thought about stealing just once. Her fingers twitched, but then she looked at her baby's face, innocent and pure, and she shook her head. If she were caught, her baby would be left alone. She could not risk it. The night grew colder. The neon lights blinked, throwing sharp shadows across her face. Her stomach ached with hunger, but she ignored it. She rocked her baby gently, whispering a lullaby she barely remembered. Her voice cracked with every note. People passed by. Aliens in fine clothes carrying bags full of food. They laughed, they ate, they lived. And she, a mother with nothing, stood in the middle of them all, invisible. Her child coughed again, weaker this time. Her heart broke. She held the baby closer, whispering, "Just a little longer. I will find a way," but inside she felt the crushing weight of truth. She was running out of time, running out of hope, and running out of choices. The marketplace buzzed on, blind to her pain, and somewhere in the crowd, unseen, a stranger's eyes began to watch her. The night sky above the alien city was never dark. Towers stretched high, covered in neon signs that flashed like fireflies. Machines hovered through the streets, carrying the rich to their homes in shining vehicles. The ground below was a different story. The poor lived in the shadows in broken alleys where light rarely touched. The alien mother walked through those streets, her baby pressed close to her chest. The child's small breaths rattled weakly, each sound like a knife in her heart. She whispered, "Hold on, little one. Just hold on." Her words floated into the cold air, lost in the noise of the city. Everywhere she looked, there were signs of wealth she could never touch. Golden shops with glowing windows displayed food, medicine, and warm clothes. Guards with shining weapons stood outside, keeping people like her away. The mother felt small, a shadow among giants. As she walked, she passed other poor families. Children sat on the ground with empty bowls, their eyes hollow. Old aliens lay wrapped in thin blankets, coughing into the night. No one stopped for them. No one helped. On this planet, mercy was rare and kindness was weaker than coin. Her baby whimpered again. She tried to hush him, rocking gently. But the child was hungry, and hunger could not be silenced. She felt the stares of strangers, annoyed, judging. Some covered their ears, others moved away. In this world, a crying baby was not a call for help. It was only noise. The mother's steps slowed. Her legs were heavy. She had not eaten in 2 days, saving everything for the baby. Her stomach twisted with pain, but she ignored it. Survival was no longer about her. Every thought, every breath, every step, everything belonged to the small life in her arms. She reached a corner where the lights of the rich faded and the broken part of the city began. Here the street smelled of smoke and decay. Vendors sold scraps of food cooked in dirty oil. Rusty machines sputtered as they tried to work. The people here were thin, their clothes torn, their eyes hard. One of them, a beggar with metal parts replacing his arms, called to her. "Mother, share your coins. My children starve too." She clutched her pouch tightly, shaking her head. "I have nothing." The beggar's eyes narrowed. "Then you are like me, empty." She walked faster, heart pounding. Even among the poor, kindness was not guaranteed. Hunger turned neighbor against neighbor. Everyone fought for survival, and survival had no friends. The baby let out another weak cry. The sound drew the attention of a group of street boys, older, ragged, with sharp smiles. They followed her for a short while, whispering and laughing. She held her child tighter, praying they would lose interest. Luckily they did, running off into the shadows. But fear stayed with her, heavy as stone. She reached a water station, a rusty pipe dripping into a cracked basin. She bent down, filled her hands, and touched the cool drops to her baby's lips. The child swallowed slowly, but it was not enough. Water could not replace milk. She knew that. The baby needed more, or the sickness would grow worse. The mother sat on the edge of the basin for a moment, her body trembling. She looked up at the towers above, glowing with wealth. She wondered how many babies up there drank warm formula, wrapped in clean blankets. How many mothers never had to count their coins, never had to beg. Her throat ached with unspoken anger. Why must her child suffer while others lived in comfort? Why was kindness absent in a world filled with so much abundance? She wanted to scream at the sky, but her voice stayed locked inside her chest. She stood again, forcing her legs to move. She could not stop. Stopping meant giving up, and giving up meant death for the child. She walked deeper into the night, every step echoing her desperation. At another corner, she saw a group of rich aliens stepping out of a glowing vehicle. Their clothes shimmered with silver threads, their laughter loud and careless. One of them dropped a piece of fruit onto the ground untouched. The mother stared at it, her mouth dry. For a moment she thought about running forward, picking it up, feeding it to her child. But a guard stepped between her and the fruit, glaring. "Back!" His voice was sharp. She lowered her head, retreating into the shadows once more. Even scraps were not for her. The baby coughed again, weak and broken. She kissed his forehead, whispering, "Forgive me, little one. Forgive me." The city roared around her, machines, voices, laughter, greed. But inside her, silence grew. A silence filled with fear, pain, and the weight of hopelessness. She felt as if the world had forgotten her, erased her, left her to vanish in the cracks of the streets. And yet, she kept walking. For her baby, she would walk until her legs gave out. The night was long, the world was cruel, and mercy seemed far away. But in the crowd, unseen by her eyes, someone different was watching. A stranger whose heart still carried warmth. A stranger who would soon step forward and change everything. The alien mother stopped at the edge of the market, her chest rising and falling with exhaustion. Her baby was heavier now, though the child was thin and frail. It was not the weight of the body she carried. It was the weight of fear, of time slipping away. She slid her hand into her small pouch once more. Inside were only a few coins, dull and almost useless. She poured them into her palm, watching the dim light reflect off the scratched metal. 1 coin, 2 coins, 3. Her lips pressed together as she counted each one. Her heart prayed the number would somehow be greater than before. But it was the same, pitiful, small, not enough. Still, she whispered to herself, maybe someone will take them. She tucked the coins carefully back into the pouch as if they were treasures. To anyone else, they were worthless scraps. But to her, they were the last pieces of hope she carried. The baby stirred in her arms, letting out a faint cry. The sound was softer than it had been hours ago, and that scared her more than any loud wail. Weakness was worse than hunger. Weakness was the sign that the baby's strength was fading. She looked around, her eyes catching sight of a narrow shop glowing with pale green light. Bottles of formula sat behind the glass, lined neatly in rows. She could almost feel their weight in her hands. Imagine the relief of pouring one into a cup for her child. Her steps were shaky as she entered the shop. The air inside was warmer, filled with the smell of food and medicine. Behind the counter stood a tall vendor with thick scales on his skin and cold eyes that measured every customer like prey. The mother approached slowly. She reached into her pouch and spilled the coins onto the counter. They clinked softly. Such a small sound in such a large world. "Please," she said, her voice trembling. "1 bottle of formula. This is all I have." The vendor stared at the coins. He tapped one with his claw, letting it spin on the counter until it fell flat. Then he looked up at her with a cruel smile. "This," he said, "this is nothing." The mother's throat tightened. "It is all I have. Please, my child, he needs it. He is sick." The vendor leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Do you think I run a charity? Formula costs 5 times this amount. If I gave it to you for scraps, I would lose profit. I would be a fool." Tears filled her eyes, but she forced her voice steady. "I beg you. Just 1 bottle. I will work. I will clean your floor. I will do anything." The vendor chuckled darkly. "Work? You? A starving mother with a crying baby? You have nothing to offer." He shoved the coins back toward her. They scattered, clattering against the counter and falling to the floor. She bent quickly, gathering them with shaking hands. Each coin felt heavier now, weighed down with shame. Her baby cried louder at the sudden noise, the sound bouncing off the shop walls. "Leave," the vendor snapped. "You're scaring my paying customers." She stood slowly, clutching the coins tight in her fist. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "May the stars never show you mercy." Then she turned and stepped back into the cold street. Outside, the marketplace still buzzed with life. Rich customers laughed, buying food in piles they could never finish. Children of wealth ran past her, holding sweet fruits that dripped juice onto the ground. One of them dropped half his meal, letting it rot in the dust, and never looked back. The mother tightened her grip on her pouch. She felt the small round coins digging into her skin, leaving marks. These coins were all she had left, and yet they were useless. For a moment she thought of throwing them away, casting them into the gutter where they belonged. But then she stopped. She could not do it. Even if they were worthless, they were still something, and something was better than nothing. She sat on a broken step at the edge of the road. Her baby whimpered again, too weak to scream. She rocked the child, humming a lullaby with a voice cracked by hunger. As she sang, she remembered the past, the home she had lost, the family that was gone. Once life had been kinder. Once she had dreamed of a future for her child filled with safety and joy. Now her dream was only survival for one more night. Her eyes drifted toward the marketplace lights. She thought about stealing again. If she moved fast, maybe she could grab a bottle and run. But her legs were weak, her baby heavier with each step, and the guards were always near. If she failed, her child would be left alone in a cruel world. So she sat in silence, the coins pressed against her palm. She whispered to her child, "I will find a way. I promise." But deep down she wondered if it was true. The marketplace did not care. It glowed, it laughed, it moved on, blind to the pain of one mother and her child. And still, somewhere in the crowd, a pair of human eyes kept watching her, Eyes that saw her not as noise, not as waste, but as a mother fighting for her child. Eyes that would soon decide her fate. The marketplace glowed with 1,000 colors, but to the alien mother it was only shadows. She sat on the cold stone step, her baby pressed close to her chest, her hand tight around the pouch of useless coins. The sound of the crowd was a storm. Voices, machines, laughter, but inside her there was only silence. Her child stirred weakly, eyes half closed, mouth searching for food that was not there. She kissed the tiny forehead, whispering, "Stay with me, please." And then through the noise of the market something shifted. It was small at first, a presence, a movement. A figure walked slowly through the crowd, different from the rest. Taller, straighter, moving with calm steps. His clothes were simple compared to the glowing robes of the rich. His skin was pale under the market lights, his face shaped in a way the locals had never seen. He was a human. Few humans came to this part of the galaxy. They were travelers, wanderers, sometimes traders. Most aliens saw them as strange outsiders, curious but unimportant. And yet as the human moved through the crowd, something about him drew attention. Not because of wealth, not because of power, but because he looked. He actually looked. Where others passed the mother by without a glance, the human's eyes stopped. He saw her. The mother did not notice at first. Her eyes were lowered, fixed on her baby. But the human slowed his steps, standing not far from her. He watched as she rocked her child, as she whispered words no one else cared to hear. For a moment he said nothing. He only listened. Around them the world rushed on. Vendors shouted prices, customers argued, laughter rang out. But in that small space between the mother and the stranger, the noise seemed to fade. Finally, the human stepped closer. His voice was quiet but firm. "Are you all right?" The mother froze. Slowly she lifted her head. Her eyes met his, and for the first time that night, someone's gaze did not pass through her. It stayed. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her throat was dry, her mind heavy. She only shook her head, holding her baby tighter. The human crouched down to her level. His face was calm, his eyes soft but steady. "Your child? He is hungry, isn't he?" Tears burned her eyes. She nodded once, quickly, ashamed. The human looked toward the shops, at the glowing bottles of formula stacked neatly behind glass, his brow furrowed. "How much?" he asked. The mother hesitated. She opened her pouch with shaking hands, showing him the coins. They glittered weakly in the light. "Not enough," she whispered. The human studied the coins, then looked back at her. Something in his face changed, a mix of sadness and anger. Not at her, but at the world around them. He stood, tall again, and walked toward the nearest stall. The vendor looked up, annoyed, until he saw who it was. A human customer, rare, valuable. "What do you want, outsider?" the vendor asked. The human reached into his pocket and pulled out something small but powerful, a trade chip, glowing with encoded value. More than enough for a bottle. More than enough for 10. He placed it on the counter. "Formula now!" The vendor's eyes lit with greed. He hurried to fetch a bottle, placing it in the human's hand. "Here, finest quality." The human didn't thank him. He didn't smile. He turned back to the mother. She stared at him, her lips parted in disbelief. He held the bottle out, his voice steady but gentle. "For your child." Her hands shook as she reached forward. She took the bottle slowly, as if it might vanish. Her baby stirred, smelling the promise of food. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you help me?" The human crouched again, meeting her eyes. For a moment he seemed to search for the right words. Then he said simply, "Because no one else did." The words hit her harder than any rejection. She clutched the bottle to her chest, whispering again and again, "Thank you, thank you." Her voice was cracked, but her gratitude filled the air. The baby cried once more, but this time the sound was different. It was hunger, yes, but it was also hope, a sound that would soon be answered. The human watched her for a moment longer. Then he said softly, "Feed him. He needs you strong." The mother nodded, unable to speak. She pressed the bottle close, rocking her child as if holding the future in her arms. The human stood once more, his figure tall against the glowing lights of the marketplace. Around them the crowd still moved, still laughed, still ignored. But something had changed. In the cold heart of the city, a spark of warmth had been lit. The stranger turned his head, scanning the busy streets. His eyes narrowed, as if he already knew that this small act of kindness was more than it seemed. as if he understood that sometimes the smallest choices carried the greatest weight. And then, without another word, he stepped back into the crowd. But his presence lingered, like a light that refused to fade. The bottle trembled in the alien mother's hands. It was warm, glowing faintly under the neon lights of the city. For a moment, she could not believe it was real. Too many times she had been pushed aside, ignored, or mocked. Yet here it was, a gift she had never expected. Her baby stirred, tiny hands twitching against her chest. The child's weak cry grew louder, almost desperate, as if he could smell the milk inside the bottle. The mother's throat tightened. She looked up at the human, her eyes wide with tears. He gave a small nod, his voice calm. "Feed him." She fumbled with the cap, her fingers shaking. At last she pressed the bottle to the baby's lips. The child latched quickly, drinking as if the universe itself depended on it. The sound of sucking filled the air, soft but powerful. It was the sound of life returning. The mother's tears rolled freely now. She stroked the baby's cheek with her trembling hand. "Yes, yes, drink, my love," she whispered. Her voice cracked with relief. For the first time in days, she felt a piece of hope spark in her chest. The human crouched near her again, silent, watching. He saw the way her shoulders relaxed, the way her eyes softened as her child fed. He did not interrupt. This moment belonged to her. Around them, the market moved on. Vendors shouted, customers bargained, machines hummed. But to the mother, all of it faded into silence. There was only her baby, and the bottle of life in her hands. When the child finally slowed, small bubbles forming inside the bottle, the mother pulled him gently away. Milk glistened on his lips. His eyes closed, heavy with comfort, his tiny body warm against hers. She rocked him softly, her heart full. She looked up at the human again. Her voice shook, almost a whisper. "Why did you do this?" "You don't know me. You don't even know my name." The human's eyes softened. "I didn't need to know your name," he said. "I only saw a mother who refused to give up on her child." The words hit her like a wave. For so long she had felt invisible. For so long she had believed no one saw her struggle. Yet this stranger, this human, had looked, had noticed, and had cared. Her hands clutched the bottle tighter. "I begged my own people," she whispered. They turned away. They called me worthless. "But you?" She stopped, unable to finish. The human leaned forward slightly. "Sometimes those closest to us forget what matters. Sometimes it takes a stranger to remind them." The mother stared at him, tears still shining in her eyes. She wanted to say more, but words failed. Instead, she simply nodded, her gratitude too deep for speech. For a long while, neither spoke. The baby slept peacefully, his breathing steady, his tiny fingers curled against his mother's chest. The human sat nearby, watching quietly, as if guarding them from the cold eyes of the city. At last, the mother broke the silence. Her voice was soft but firm. "You saved him. You saved me. I will never forget this." The human shook his head gently. "I only did what anyone should have done. You saved him by refusing to give up." The mother looked down at her child, then back at the human. "No," she whispered. "Without you, I would have lost him tonight." The human said nothing more. His silence carried weight, but also warmth. A gust of wind blew through the marketplace, carrying the smells of food and smoke. The mother shivered. She had no cloak, no blanket. Only the thin cloth wrapped around her baby. The human noticed. He slipped off his own outer garment, a simple coat, worn but warm, and placed it around her shoulders. She gasped softly, clutching it close. "You don't have to," she began. But he cut her off with a quiet shake of his head. "Keep it, the night is cold." Her eyes filled again. "You give me too much." He looked at her steadily. "I give you only what you need." The mother closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the warmth of the coat, the weight of kindness heavy on her shoulders. She whispered a prayer she hadn't spoken in years, one of thanks, one of hope. When she opened her eyes again, she found the human watching her still. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes carried something she had not seen in anyone for a long time. Respect. She lowered her head, whispering, "May the stars remember your kindness. May they guide you always." The human gave a small smile. "And may they guide your child to a better life." The mother's arms tightened around her baby. She looked at the tiny face, so fragile, so innocent. For the first time in forever, she let herself imagine a future, not just another day of hunger, but something more. The human stood, his tall figure rising against the glow of the marketplace. He did not speak again. He only gave her one last nod before turning to go, but as he stepped into the crowd, his presence lingered, like a light that refused to be swallowed by the dark. The mother watched him disappear, her heart heavy but filled with warmth. She looked down at her child, who now slept peacefully, and whispered, "We are not alone anymore." The marketplace did not slow down. Lights still flashed. Vendors still shouted. The rich still bargained over luxuries they did not need. To the city, nothing had changed. But to one mother holding her child, the entire universe felt different. The baby lay against her chest, warm and calm, his belly full for the first time in days. His breathing was soft, steady, no longer broken by hunger. The mother stroked his cheek with her thumb, watching the tiny rise and fall of his chest. Relief washed through her like a tide. For so long she had lived in fear. Every day was a battle, every night a test of survival. She had grown used to being invisible, to being treated as if she did not exist. But tonight someone had seen her. Someone had given without asking for anything in return. The human's coat was still wrapped around her shoulders. It was heavier than the thin rags she usually wore, and the warmth seeped into her bones. She pulled it closer, whispering softly, "He cared. He truly cared." Her baby stirred, letting out a small sigh as if answering her. She smiled through her tears, pressing her lips to his head. For the first time in weeks, she felt more than just exhaustion. She felt hope. The human's words echoed in her mind. "Take care of your child. One day they may change this world." She had never thought of the future before. Survival left no space for dreams. But now, as she looked down at her child, something inside her shifted. Could it be true? Could this little one, who had almost been lost, one day rise to make things better? The idea was fragile, like glass, but she held onto it with trembling hands. The city around her still seemed cruel. Wealthy shoppers laughed nearby, their arms full of food. Guards stood tall, watching the poor like hunters watch prey. Nothing had changed, yet she felt different inside. She no longer felt only despair. She carried a spark now, small but bright. The mother stood slowly, adjusting the baby in her arms. Her legs still shook from hunger, but her steps felt lighter. She walked through the streets again, but this time she did not bow her head as low. She held her child closer, not only as a shield, but as a promise. She passed other poor families in the alleys, their eyes hollow, their bodies weak. For the first time she met their gaze. She nodded softly to an old beggar, offering a smile, thin but real. He looked surprised, as if no one had ever bothered before. It was not food. It was not coins. But it was something. And she understood now that sometimes something small could mean everything. Her thoughts returned again and again to the human. Why had he helped her? Why, when so many others had turned away? He was a stranger, an outsider. Yet his act had carried more kindness than all her people combined. Perhaps that was the answer. He was different. He was not bound by the cruelty of this city. He had not been hardened by its greed. He carried something within him that others had forgotten. Compassion. The mother whispered the word under her breath. It felt strange on her tongue, almost foreign, but it was real. She had seen it. She had felt it. Her baby shifted, opening his eyes for a brief moment. They were large and bright, glowing faintly in the market lights. He blinked at her, then at the world around them, before drifting back into sleep. She held him tighter, her heart swelling. "You will grow," she whispered. "You will live. And maybe you will be the one to change all this." The thought gave her strength. The cruelty of the city had not vanished. Hunger would still come again, but now she believed she could endure. She would endure for her child. The human was gone, swallowed by the crowd, but his presence lingered in her memory. She imagined his steady eyes, his calm voice, his simple but powerful words. And with each step she took, she carried that memory like a light in the darkness. The night grew colder, but she did not shiver as before. Wrapped in the human's coat, with her baby safe in her arms, she walked forward into the unknown. The city still looked broken, but inside her, something was beginning to mend. For the first time in her life, she believed in tomorrow, and tomorrow, she thought, might hold more than survival. It might hold change. Years passed. The city did not grow kinder. The towers still shone with neon lights, the market still buzzed with greed, and the poor were still left in the shadows. But one small family had endured. The alien mother, once weak and trembling, had grown strong. Life had not spared her from hardship, but the memory of that night, the night a human gave her child a chance to live, remained in her heart. It was her fire, her shield, her reason to rise every morning. Her baby was no longer a baby. He had grown into a young boy, tall for his age, with eyes that carried both softness and fire. Where others bowed their heads in fear, he lifted his. Where others looked away from suffering, he stopped and listened. The mother often told him the story. "There was a night when I had nothing," she would say, her voice quiet but steady. "No food, no hope, only despair. And then a stranger appeared, a human. He saw us when no one else would. He gave us life. Remember this, my son. Compassion can change everything." The boy would sit in silence, his eyes wide. "But why would a stranger help us?" he once asked. The mother smiled softly. "Because kindness is not bound by blood or planet. It is a choice, and one day you must choose too." The boy never forgot those words. As he grew, he walked the same streets his mother had once wandered in despair. He saw the same hunger, the same cruelty, the same indifference, but he did not turn away. He shared what little he had, comforted children who cried and spoke out when others stayed silent. Whispers began to spread. People started to notice him, the boy with fire in his eyes and compassion in his heart. The poor followed him, not because he had wealth, but because he gave them something rarer: hope. By the time he was grown, he had become more than just a voice. He was a leader. He gathered others, mothers and fathers, children and elders, and together they demanded change. The rich mocked him at first. Guards threatened him. Vendors spat at him. But still he did not stop. His voice grew louder, his followers stronger. And then one night he stood on the steps of the market where his mother had once begged for food. His voice rose over the noise of the crowd, clear and steady. "We are not invisible," he said. "We are not worthless. We are mothers, fathers, children, families, and we deserve to live." The word spread like fire. People who had long been silent lifted their heads. The poor who had bowed under the weight of despair stood tall. The city began to tremble, not from machines or wealth, but from the strength of voices united. The mother watched from the crowd, her heart swelling with pride. She saw in her son not only the boy she had carried through hunger, but the leader he had become, and she remembered the human's words. One day they may change this world. Tears filled her eyes. The prophecy was coming true. Years later, the city was no longer the same. The market still glowed. The towers still reached for the sky, but change had begun to take root. New laws were written. Kindness was not seen as weakness, and no mother was left to beg with empty coins while her child starved. At the heart of it all stood her son, now a man, a symbol of hope for an entire people. But in the quiet of her home, the mother still thought of the one who had started it all, the human, the stranger who had passed by on a night of despair and chosen compassion over indifference. She often told the story to her grandchildren, her voice soft with memory. "You live today because one man stopped to see us," she said. "Never forget, a small act of kindness can echo across generations." And though the human's name was lost to time, his legacy lived on, not in statues, not in books, but in the lives he had touched. One act, one bottle, one choice. That was all it had taken to light a flame in the darkness, and that flame had grown into a fire strong enough to change a world.